Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Simpleton Sermon Podcast, where we're trying to keep things simple but not stupid. As always, I am your host, Pastor JJ. I do apologize for the quality of the audio recording for the intro and the outro. We're working with a little bit different equipment. We'll be back to our normal selves next week. But this week we are finishing up our series in Proverbs. We're in chapter 25. I'm using the New Living Translation. It's been a good series getting into the book of Proverbs. I've learned a lot. It also happens to be Father's Day, and so we do have to open up with a good old classic dad joke. So settle in, grab your Bible, and here we go. Today's sermon is the finale in our series on Proverbs, and Proverbs has been this really practical, helpful book, but today is also Father's Day, so it felt appropriate to open this sermon with the greatest dad joke of all time, okay? Now, it's a classic, so you may have heard this before, okay? It's called Moses and Jesus Play Golf. It goes like this. Moses and Jesus are part of a threesome playing golf one day, and Moses pulls up to the tee and he drives a long one. The ball lands on the fairway, but it rolls directly towards a water trap. Quickly, Moses raises his golf club and the water parts, and the ball rolls right to the other side, safe and sound. Next, Jesus strolls up to the tee, and he hits a nice long drive directly towards that same water trap, but it lands right in the center of the pond, but it kind of hovers over the water. And Jesus casually walks out onto the water and chips the ball right onto the green. And then the third guy gets up, and he just kind of randomly whacks the ball. It heads out over the fence and into oncoming traffic of a nearby street. It bounces off a truck, hits a nearby tree. From there, it bounces onto the roof of a nearby shack, where it rolls down into the gutter, down the drain spout, out onto the fairway, straight towards the pond. On the way to the pond, the ball hits a little stone and bounces over the water onto a lily pad, where it quietly comes to rest. Suddenly, a large bullfrog jumps onto the lily pad, snatches the ball up in his mouth. Just then, an eagle swoops down and grabs the frog and flies away. As it passes over the green, the frog croaks with fright and drops the ball, which bounces right into the hole for a beautiful hole-in-one. Jesus leans over to Moses and whispers, "I hate playing with my dad." If you think about it, the book of Proverbs, we've been learning, is wisdom literature, which comes from this guy, King Solomon. He's the wisest king in history. It's really just a bunch of dad advice all strung together. A couple of weeks ago, I introduced it as King Solomon's Twitter thread. But it really is it's packed with down-to-earth, homegrown dad advice. I mean, think about what we have learned so far in this sermon series. Number one, we learned that the line between good and evil, it's not between us and them. That line goes right down the heart of every person. We choose wisdom or we choose folly. So number two, if somebody's trying to help you, it's really smart to listen to what they have to say. And if you want to help someone else, you got to make sure that they know you love them, that you use loyalty and kindness when you're giving someone else advice. And then we saw, in the third week, we saw that hard work is a very good thing, that it gives our lives meaning and purpose if we fill our lives with good things that we can be proud of doing. And then finally, last week, we saw that God gives us a voice. And if we get our posture, our content, and our goal correct, we can use that voice to bring healing and encouragement to the people around us. The big book of dad advice has been very good to us for the last month. It's very practical. It's very helpful. There is one more lesson for us to find, this time from the end of the book in chapter 25. Now, this teaching has been all over this sermon series, throughout every chapter, but I want to name it and drill down on it today. All these teachings, all these pieces of advice, they all teach us how to live as a child of God. And they matter because you are not alone in this world. You are not alone, which is lovely, but on the other side of that coin is that if you are not alone, that means we have to figure out how to live in community, right? Your life is not just about you. The ripples of your life are going to bump into the people around you. The final teaching is how to live life in community, how to be a good friend. And there's three parts to it. First, in verse 12, it says, to one who listens, valid criticism is like a gold earring or other gold jewelry. Trustworthy messengers refresh like snow in summer. They revive the spirit of their employer. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about mentioning snow in June, right? But I think we can all understand what he means. Did you guys notice that it hit 90 on Wednesday, right? Like, it was hot. And in the middle of that heat, I was wishing for some snow. That would have been lovely, you know? It says, having someone in your life who is trustworthy, someone who is a messenger who will tell you the truth, that's like having a nice, cool snow in the middle of that 90-degree heat. It literally revives the spirit. I was listening to a podcast this past week called Smartless, and there was an interview with this very famous actor, Bradley Cooper. And if you don't know, Bradley Cooper got his start in a bunch of kind of gritty comedies where his character was always very intense, and he was a jerk to people. That was his character. Now, nowadays, Bradley Cooper is this very successful director and actor. He's been nominated for 9 Academy Awards. But he tells the story that when he got started out acting, he was incredibly insecure, and mean comedy was sort of the big thing at the time. And so he would make people laugh by telling horribly mean jokes about them, right? And he used that as a mask in his life. But the dissonance in his life between what he was doing and the way he actually was, it led to some drug abuse and all kinds of problems in his life. And he was starting to spin out of control. Now, at the time, he happened to live next to another actor by the name of Will Arnett. And at one point, they had a dinner together, and there were lots of people, and Bradley Cooper was wearing his mask. And he was the life of the party, telling all these mean jokes and being a jerk to everybody so that people would like him and accept him. And the next morning, Will Arnett shows up at Bradley Cooper's house. And he said, "Hey, you know that dinner last night? How do you think that went?" And basically, he called Bradley Cooper out, and he said, "Look, you're being a jerk. And you can't live life this way. You are on the wrong path. You got to fix this." And in the interview, they were both there, and Bradley Cooper's crying and Will Arnett was crying. And Brad said that was the moment in his life when he realized that he had a problem with drugs. It was a turning point in his life to turn his complete life around because he had a friend who was willing to call him out and turn him around. Proverbs tells us trustworthy messengers are like snow on a summer day. They revive us. Verse 12, it says, valid criticism is like gold jewelry. It's valuable. Valid criticism is valuable. It can literally save someone's life. Verse 15 tells us, patience can persuade a prince. Soft speech can break bones. We talked about this last week. That's the first key to being a good friend. Valid criticism is valuable, but the method matters. Proverbs says that patience and soft speech can make all the difference. Verse 14, it says, a loud and cheerful greeting early in the morning. I'm wrong page. Chapter 25, verses 14. It says, a person who promises a gift but doesn't give it is like clouds and wind that brings no rain. It's pretty basic. Right? If you promise to do something, see it through. Be true to your word. Down in verse 18, it says, telling lies about others is as harmful as hitting them with an axe, wounding them with a sword, or shooting them with a sharp arrow. Putting confidence in an unreliable person in times of trouble, it's like chewing on a broken tooth or walking on a lame foot. So we got the farmer metaphor with the clouds, right? And no rain. The warrior metaphor where it's axes and swords and arrows and stuff. And then there's the body metaphor with the broken tooth and the lame foot. All these different metaphors are describing one teaching. Be reliable. Tell the truth and live your life in the way that you say you will. There's an old quote from a guy named Charles Spurgeon, the Prince of Preachers, where he says, a man's life is always more forcible than his speech. When men take stock of him, they're going to reckon your deeds as dollars and your words as pennies. If your life and doctrine disagree, the mass of onlookers will accept his practice and reject his preaching. He said, your deeds are dollars, your words are pennies. It's a decent metric. A friend of mine on Twitter reached out to me with this story last week. He said, when I was 20 and I was a newlywed, our refrigerator went out in our apartment. Maintenance in that apartment complex was just this elderly man. And he said that we could remove the fridge from the third floor apartment and we could swap it with a new fridge from across the street, but we had to do it ourselves. And at 20 years old, he thought he had the best friends in the world, so he proceeded to call down the list of friends. Who can help me move these fridges? I need help. Nobody was available. Suddenly, all those friends were gone. So he called his dad, and his dad showed up within 5 minutes with a hand truck, and they helped lug 2 fridges downstairs. He said, literally, a friend closer than a brother, my father. The Bible teaches us that to be a good friend, to be a good neighbor, valid criticism is valuable, and your deeds are dollars, but your words are pennies. Verse 16 says, do you like honey? Don't eat too much, or it will make you sick. Don't visit your neighbors too often, or you will wear out your welcome. And it's funny because the first part of that sounds like something I would say to my toddler, right? Like, do you like honey? Don't eat too much honey. But the second part sounds like something we all need to hear. Moderation is not just for sweets. It also applies to our social interactions. A good friend doesn't wear out their welcome by visiting too much. Now, I want to be careful here because I know there are some folks have very low self-esteem and they think to themselves, well, nobody ever wants me to visit. Right? Oh, I'm always intruding on other people. And it's like, that's not the truth either. If we're going to be in community together as brothers and sisters in Christ, we need to be in community. There is a sweet spot in the middle. I think of it like this. Think about when you sit next to someone to talk to them. Right? I don't want you to sit all the way over on the other side of the room because I can't talk to you. But I also don't want you to sit on my lap because then I can't talk to you, right? There is a sweet spot. Sit next to me in this life, this journey of life. We sit close enough to hear while also giving personal space. Moderation's not just for sweets. It also works in relationships. Verse 20. It says, singing cheerful songs to a person with a heavy heart is like taking somebody's coat in cold weather or pouring vinegar in a wound. You ever have a paper cut and you use hand sanitizer? Right? You immediately find where that paper cut is, right? That's kind of what he's talking about. That sting, that pain that lets you know exactly where the paper cut is. That's what it's like when you're singing cheerful songs while there's somebody there with a heavy heart. We get the same advice in the New Testament from Paul in the book of Romans. He says in chapter 12, verse 15, he says, be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with each other. Basically, the long and short of it is when you're with someone, be there for them, for what they need in the way that they need you. There's a story that comes from one of my favorite TV shows called The West Wing. And they're telling the story, and it's like a guy's walking down the street, and he falls into a hole, and the walls are so steep he can't get out. And a doctor walks by the hole, and the man cries out, hey, doc, can you help me out? I'm down in this hole. And the doctor writes a prescription, throws it in the hole, and keeps walking. Then the priest comes along, and the man shouts out, Father, I'm down in this hole. Can you help me out? And the priest writes down a prayer, throws it in the hole, and keeps walking. Finally, a friend walks by. And the man shouts up and he says, hey, Joe, can you help me out? It's me. I'm down in this hole. Can you help me? So the friend jumps down into the hole. And the friend says, you idiot. What are you, stupid? Now we're both down in the hole. And the friend says, yeah, but I've been down here before, and I know the way out. Don't sing cheerful songs to somebody who has a broken heart. Sometimes in order to be a good friend to someone, you have to get down in the hole with them to show them the way out. Or as Paul puts it, weep with those who weep and be happy with those who are happy. See, the good news that we see in the whole book of Proverbs, but in this chapter specifically, the good news is that God built you for community. So many of us, we think that our faith life, it's just me and God, right? We think that the Christian life is just about what I believe up in my head, but God has built you for community, and that means that the Christian life has to be lived out in community. I think one of the best ways to think about Christian community is living on a river, right? If you live on a river, you might think, this is my yard. I can do whatever I want to the water. But whatever you do is going to affect people downstream. Just like the people upstream from you, whatever they do is going to affect you. To use kind of a gross metaphor, you don't pee upstream from your friends. God built us for community. The world's a lot less individualistic than you might think. We have to be justice-oriented. Think not just about ourselves, but about how all the things that we do affect the people around us too. All the teachings in Proverbs, the big book of dad advice, it's not just about helping you be a good person all by yourself. It's about helping all of us. It's how to live best in community because God built you for community. Now, coming out of all that, the application should be pretty obvious. My challenge to you today and every day, based on the fact that God built you for community and he wants you to live that out by loving your neighbor, my challenge is be a good neighbor. Right? Set that as a goal for your life, right? What could you change to help you be a good neighbor? Well, I suppose I can give you a few suggestions. First, remember that valid criticism is valuable. If somebody comes to you and they love you and they're on your team and they say something you don't want to hear, listen to what they have to say. Maybe they're trying to help you. Maybe they're not attacking you. Valid criticism is valuable. And the other side of that coin is that if you have a friend who is struggling, talk to them. Give your friend that valuable, valid criticism. I can't tell you how many times people come to me and they tell me things about somebody else. And I say, oh my gosh, you're right. That's good advice. Did you tell them that? Oh, no. No, they might get mad at me. But maybe they will get mad at you. But if you come to them in love, with loyalty and kindness, valid criticism is valuable. It's a way to be a good friend. Second piece of being a good neighbor is be reliable. If you want to be a good Christian neighbor, let your words and your actions line up. Right? I like that Spurgeon quote, reckon your deeds as dollars and your words as pennies. One of my favorite stories about being a good friend is that classic story about the two guys who were hunting in northern Michigan. And one guy yells out and the other one looks up and sees an enormous bear charging right at them. And the first guy frantically sits down and starts putting on his tennis shoes. And the friend asks him, what are you doing? You can't outrun a bear. And the friend responds, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. That's the opposite of being a reliable friend, right? The second key to being a good neighbor is to be reliable. And I should mention, the better you are at being reliable, the easier it is to do step one. When somebody knows you're reliable, when your words line up with your actions, they are more likely to listen to you when you get up the courage to give them that valid, valuable criticism. The last piece and the third step to being a good neighbor is what we find in the text is moderate your methods. Like eating too much honey, don't be that neighbor who overstays their welcome. Don't be singing cheerful songs to a person with a heavy heart. Moderate your methods. Pick the right thing for the right time to be a good friend to each person. There's a guy named Ed Stetzer. He's a pastor who wrote a book called Christians in the Age of Outrage. And he tells the story about one time when he and his wife sat down and they took out a map of their street. Like literally they had like an aerial map of their neighborhood. And they mapped out their literal neighbors with a goal that they were going to meet all their neighbors and be the best neighbors they possibly could. And they started by just praying for the house, right? I don't know who they are. I have a number on the map. That's a house. But then they got to know them. Then they'd meet their neighbors. And then they could pray for the people because they had names. And then they'd get to know them even more. And then they could pray for their needs. And so once they knew the house, and they knew the names, and they knew the needs, they had a neighbor. They had a friend that they had established a friendship with. And then they could move to the next house and get to know them. Now, I don't know if it was as organized and systematic as all that, but basically he talks about in one of his books how he set a goal and they just worked in their neighborhood with the people who were right around them, and he started leading people into a relationship with Jesus Christ by being a good neighbor and praying for them. I thought that was pretty cool. C. Raymond Barron once said, "What is a friend? Friends are people with whom you dare to be yourself. Your soul can be naked with them. They ask you to put on nothing, only to be what you are. They don't want you to be better or worse. When you are with them, you feel as a prisoner feels who has been declared innocent. You don't have to be on your guard. You can say what you think as long as it is genuinely you. Friends understand those contradictions in your nature that lead you to misjudge others to misjudge you. With a friend, you can breathe easily. They understand you. You can weep with them. You can sing with them, you can laugh with them, you can pray with them, but through it all and underneath, they see, they know, and they love you. A friend? What is a friend? Just one, I repeat, with whom you dare to be yourself." And so I'll leave you with this. May you leave here this morning reminded that God built you for community. May you resolve to be the best neighbor, the best friend that you can be to the people around you. And then I pray that God may surround each and every one of you with the same. Amen.
This has been another episode of the Simpleton Sermon Podcast. I really hope you enjoyed the whole series on Proverbs. It's been for the last 5 weeks. It's been really great. If you appreciate this podcast and what we do, go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe, share, do the 5 stars on Spotify, or leave a review on Apple, or whatever it is on your preferred podcast provider. If you're looking for the manuscript, you can head over to thesimpleton.org, where we have the manuscript downloadable in Word or PDF, or you can just read it in the web browser. We also have the video version on the YouTube channel. It's just the Simpleton Sermon Podcast YouTube channel, or of course here on audio format as well. I always like to give my little plug for the local church. If you are able to find a body of believers, brothers and sisters in Christ who can support you, encourage you, and challenge you, please do so. These sermons can never replace that connection in the local church. Until next time, I am looking forward to the future. Bye.